Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're getting into a story that's just huge. It's echoed down through the ages. The Trojan horse.
Mm.
You've shared some really fascinating material, and well, our mission today is to really unpack this legendary trick.
That's right. We want to explore what the old accounts actually say, where, history might blur with the myth.
Yeah, and why does this story still grab us today?
Exactly. And the sources you shared, mostly drawing from that comprehensive Wikipedia entry, they pull together a lot. We're talking Virgil's Aeneid, Homer's Odyssey,
Right.
even fragments from other works, plus, archaeological viewpoints. It's quite a mix.
And you might think, okay, wooden horse, soldiers pop out, Troy falls easy. But there's like way more nuance here.
Oh, definitely.
Things that might make you go, huh? Like how many soldiers were actually instead? Different counts on that. And some really compelling ideas about where the whole story might have even come from in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's really dig into this famous deception.
Absolutely. It looks simple on the surface, but the sources reveal, well, a whole lot of variation and different takes. My job here is just to help navigate that complexity, add some context,
Perfect.
and maybe shed some light on why this particular story has lasted so long.
Okay, so let's start with the classic story,
Uh-huh.
the one most of us learn.
Yeah.
10 years, right. 10 years the Greeks are banging their heads against the walls of Troy.
Pretty much, yeah. A total stalemate. They're getting absolutely nowhere.
And this is where Odysseus, ever the clever one, hatches this, well, let's call it an unconventional plan.
It is. And Virgil's Aeneid, that really gives us the most detailed blow-by-blow of this whole thing. After that decade of fighting, seems like they've hit a dead end.
Right.
So the plan is build this giant wooden horse, hide some top soldiers inside, Odysseus included, of course, and then make it look like they've given up, sailed away.
And we see bits of this elsewhere too, don't we? Like Homer mentions it in the Odyssey, the cleverness of it.
He does, yeah. It's mentioned as one of Odysseus's, great strategic moves. The Iliad ends before the horse, but it definitely sets up the Greeks, especially Odysseus, as being capable of this kind of thinking.
Sets the stage.
Exactly. And even the sort of fragmented accounts, they all add little pieces to the puzzle.
It's interesting how Virgil gives the most detail, but the idea of the horse was around before him.
Oh, absolutely. We hear about Epeus, the guy who actually built it. Some versions say Athena herself guided his hand.
Wow.
And then much later, this Greek poet Quintus Smyrnaeus, writing around the 4th century AD, he claimed they knocked it together in just 3 days.
3 days. That seems incredibly fast for something so massive and, well, important.
It does seem quick, doesn't it? Maybe some poetic license there.
Maybe. And then that inscription they supposedly put on it. For the return home, the Greeks dedicate this offering to Athena. I mean, the sheer nerve.
It's brilliant psychological warfare, isn't it? Playing right into Trojan beliefs. And then you have Sinon.
Ah, Sinon, the guy left behind.
Yes, the Greek soldier with the incredibly dangerous job. He has to convince the Trojans the fleet really sailed away.
Okay.
And that the horse, well, it was built too big to fit through their gates on purpose.
Why?
So the Trojans couldn't take it inside and claim Athena's favor for themselves? Keep it outside, Sinon argues, and that favor stays with the Greeks. Or rather, if the Trojans harm it, they incur Athena's wrath, but if they bring it in, well, that ensures Troy's safety. He spins this whole tale.
It's almost hard to believe they bought it, but maybe after 10 years of war.
Desperation, wishful thinking, probably a bit of both.
And of course the warnings, the ignored warnings.
Ugh.
Bakun. I fear Greeks, even bearing gifts. Chilling line.
It really is. And his death, that's significant too. Virgil says Poseidon sent the sea serpents to shut him up, basically.
Right, stop him spoiling the plan.
But another source, Apollodorus, says it was Apollo punishing Laocoon for some earlier offense.
Huh. So even the details of the warning and why it was ignored, they vary.
They do. It shows how these myths adapt and change in the telling.
And then there's Cassandra, always the prophetess nobody listens to.
Exactly. She's there too, apparently, warning that the horse means doom for Troy. But, her curse is that she's never believed.
It's such a tragic theme in Greek stories, isn't it?
Yeah.
Knowing the future, but being powerless to change it
Yeah.
because no one listens.
It really is. It says a lot about, maybe, human nature, rejecting truths we don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And Homer gives us another nail-biting moment in the Odyssey. Helen walks around the horse,
Oh, right.
and she starts imitating the voices of the wives of the Greek soldiers hidden inside, trying to trick them into revealing themselves.
No way. That's incredibly tense.
Apparently, Odysseus had to physically clamp his hand over one guy's mouth, Anticlus, to stop him from calling out.
Wow. Talk about a close call. Imagine the discipline required inside that thing.
Exactly. Silent, cramped, probably terrified. And then night falls.
And they make their move.
They emerge, open the gates, the supposedly departed Greek army floods back in.
And that's it for Troy. 10 years of siege, ended by one, well, very clever, very sneaky wooden horse.
And just quickly on the numbers inside, it's all over the place in the sources.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that.
Quintus Menaeus says 30, but hints maybe more. The Bibliotheca says 50. Tzetzes, a Byzantine writer, says 23. Later tradition kind of standardized it around 40, sometimes even listing names.
So not one definitive number.
No, and that's okay. It's typical of how myths evolve. Different storytellers, different details.
Okay, so that's the myth, the story we generally know. But we hinted there might be more grounded explanations. What about the idea it wasn't a horse at all, maybe a siege engine?
That's a pretty popular theory, yeah. And it makes sense when you think about it. Ancient armies often name their siege machines after animals.
Like the Roman onager, the wild donkey.
Exactly. Or Assyrian siege towers, sometimes covered in hides for protection. Pausanias, a Greek raider from the 2nd century AD, he actually suggested it was just a device to break the walls.
So not a literal horse statue filled with guys, but maybe a battering ram or a tower with a horse-like name or appearance.
Precisely. He sort of implied the Trojans were a bit naive to think otherwise.
That feels plausible. You see a giant wooden thing on wheels coming at your city. You'd think weapon.
You'd think so. But maybe the story got, embellished over time. Why the horse specifically, though, remains a question.
Yeah, why not a wolf or a lion? And if it was just a siege engine, does that explain the hiding inside part?
That's the tricky bit. Maybe the hiding inside was a later addition to make the story more dramatic. Or maybe some siege engines did have small compartments for soldiers to exploit a breach. We don't know for sure.
Okay, what about the ship theory? That the word hippos could mean ship and horse.
Right, that's another interesting angle. The Greek word hippos and the language used, describing putting men in the horse, often uses the same verbs as putting men on a ship. Plus, Homer calls ships seahorses sometimes in the Odyssey. And there's a specific type of Phoenician merchant ship, apparently also called a hippos, that often had a horse head figurehead.
Ah, so maybe the horse was actually one of these ships, maybe presented as an offering.
That's the idea. Maybe filled with warriors hidden in the hull? These hippo ships were common in the Levant around that time, used for trade, sometimes given as tribute.
So the story starts with a ship trick, and over time, the horse part takes over the narrative. That's quite compelling.
It is, and there's maybe even some artifact evidence backing this up, potentially.
Oh.
Depictions of ships with horse head decorations from the Minoan and Mycenaean periods. And a seal from Knossos, maybe around 1200 BC.
Wow, that's early.
Yeah, it shows a ship, oarsmen, and a clear horse figurehead. Some scholars think this could be a super early pre-Homer image representing the Trojan horse story, but in its ship form.
So the idea of deception involving a horse-like vessel might be even older than we thought.
It's possible. It shows how deep the roots of these myths might go, maybe twisting around real objects or events.
Okay, one more theory, the earthquake one. This feels a bit more metaphorical.
Yeah, this one's from Fritz Schuckermeyer. His idea links the horse to Poseidon.
God of the sea. And horses.
And earthquakes, exactly. And archaeology does show that Troy VI, the level often associated with the Trojan War, seems to have been heavily damaged by an earthquake.
Right.
So the theory goes, maybe the horse isn't a physical object made by the Greeks, but a symbol for the earthquake, sent by Poseidon, that damaged Troy's walls enough for the Greeks to finally get in.
Nature is the ultimate infiltrator. That's a fascinating way to think about it. The earth itself being the Trojan horse.
It is. But as you mentioned earlier, there's that little wrinkle.
That Poseidon is also said to have built Troy's walls in the first place.
Exactly. So why would he then destroy them? It raises questions about consistency within the mythology itself.
True. But still, a really thought-provoking link between the myth and what might have actually happened geologically.
Definitely adds another layer to consider.
Let's shift gears slightly. What about how the ancients saw the horse? The artistic depictions.
It's interesting because really early images, say before 480 BC, are actually quite rare.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The earliest one we know of is on a Boeotian fibula, like a safety pin or clasp from around 700 BC.
And what does it show?
It's pretty simple, but you can make out wheels and what look like openings or windows on the horse's side. So even then, the idea of it being mobile and having something inside seems present.
Gotcha. Mobile and hollow, basically.
Pretty much. Then you get these big storage jars, pithoi, from Mykonos and Tinos around 675, 650 BC.
Hmm.
And the Mykonos one is really famous because it clearly shows warriors' faces looking out from ports along the horse's body.
Ah, so explicitly showing the soldiers inside.
Yes. And historian Michael Wood even dated that vase possibly before Homer's epics were written down.
Which would mean?
The story, or at least that visual element of soldiers inside the horse, might have been circulating visually even before we get the definitive literary versions.
That's wild. The interplay between pictures and stories back then.
It really is. It wasn't necessarily just text influencing art. We also see it later on a Corinthian flask around 560 BC, a vase fragment, even an Etruscan scarab gem.
So definitely captured the imagination.
It did. And a slightly later attic fragment, maybe 400 BC, actually shows Greeks climbing down from it out of a little hatch.
So the art gives us these little snapshots of how people pictured it across different times and places.
Exactly. Adds texture to the literary accounts.
Okay, fast forward to today. The phrase Trojan horse.
Mm-hmm.
It's everywhere, but used metaphorically, right?
Absolutely. It's become this incredibly powerful shorthand.
For what, basically? Deception.
Yeah, deception is key. Specifically, a trick or strategy that gets an enemy invited into a secure place. Something that looks harmless, maybe even desirable.
But has a hidden, dangerous intent.
Precisely. Subversion from within, using disguise.
We talk about it in politics and business strategy.
And, of course, most famously now, in computers.
Right, Trojan horse malware.
Exactly. Malicious software that tricks you into installing it because it looks like something legitimate or useful.
Just like the original horse looked like a gift or an offering.
It maps perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You willingly bring the danger inside your own defenses because you've been deceived about its true nature.
It's kind of amazing how well that ancient story fits our modern digital anxieties. What is it about the original myth that makes it such a sticky metaphor?
Well, like you said, the disguise aspect is huge. But also I think the betrayal of trust. The Trojans lowered their guard. They accepted the gift.
Yeah, they wanted to believe the war was over.
And that vulnerability, that willingness to accept something at face value, that's what the Trojans exploit, both ancient and modern targets.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, what are the big takeaways for you?
For me, it's really about that blend. How the story lives in that space between, pure myth and potential history, whether it was a real wooden horse or a siege engine or a ship or even an earthquake metaphor. The core story sticks. The idea of clever deception winning out after a long struggle.
Yeah.
And seeing how the story changes in different accounts, different artworks, that just highlights how alive these narratives are, how they get reshaped over time.
And for everyone listening, maybe think about how this story hits you. We've talked about the myth, the possible realities, the art, the modern metaphor. What part resonates most? And why do you think this tale has stuck around for, 3,000 years?
It makes you think about stories themselves, doesn't it? How these ancient narratives still frame how we understand things like deception, strategy, maybe even ignoring warnings.
Yeah, definitely. The Trojan horse, in all its forms, is just a great reminder that things aren't always what they seem. Appearances can be deceiving.
And that maybe a little bit of healthy skepticism, asking questions, looking deeper, and that's often a good idea.
That's a perfect final thought. Maybe consider this. How many other things we encounter, stories or information that seem simple on the surface, might actually have their own hidden complexities, their own Trojan horse aspect, if we just dig a little. Something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.